Hello, my name is Abigail and welcome back to Polyglot Progress. I am feeling a little bit sick right now and this video is mainly going to be me talking, so I apologize in advance if my voice sounds a little croaky, a little bit gross. This video is also going to be quite a bit of a long one, so if you'd like to pause now and go and grab a snack or some tea or your own bullet journal, I would highly recommend it. Today we're going to get cozy and spend some time in my language bullet journal. We are going to do a flip through of my 2018 spreads as well as making some kind of reflection spreads for the year and reflecting upon how my language learning went this past year. We're going to also reflect upon how having a language bullet journal separate from my normal bullet journal worked out for me. And then we are going to do some planning for the new year. I'm going to make my 2019 spreads. I'm going to set my goals and talk about how I came up with those goals along with you guys. I know the bullet journal videos usually bring in a bit of new people, so if you're new here, are interested in language learning, or maybe your New Year's resolution is to learn a language this year, I'll have linked down below my past two bullet journal videos as well as some other related content like our 2018 reflection and New Year's resolutions podcast that we posted last week. And if you end up liking this video and want to see more content from us, definitely subscribe because we are posting every Saturday this year and we would love to have you. So to begin, I just want to talk a little bit about my experience having two separate bullet journals this year. In past years, my bullet journal, which I use as kind of a calendar, a normal weekly planner, and a place to plan other goals and projects in my life, has had some spreads that I use towards language learning, but in 2018 I decided to create a separate bullet journal that would be entirely dedicated to tracking my language progress, keeping track of language specific goals, etc., because I found that in my normal bullet journal I was kind of losing those spreads and having to flip back a lot to try to find them, and I wasn't sure how this would work because having two separate journals kind of seemed like a lot to me and a little bit unnecessary to have two separate journals to be working in. But I also had this theory that if I used a separate language bullet journal, I would be able to kind of track my progress over a longer period of time without having to look through multiple journals. With the size of this language bullet journal, I'll probably be able to go for, I'm guessing, 4 or 5 years. So by the end of this journal, I'll be able to look back and see the past 4 or 5 years in my language learning, see kind of what I want to improve upon, what I did improve upon, all of my language progress in that time without having to look through 4 or 5 different journals. I also move on to a new bullet journal at the start of this school year, but usually keep track of my language goals on the calendar year scale, so it was a little bit confusing to track full year's worth of language learning over the course of 2 separate bullet journals. Overall, I found that having a separate bullet journal for language learning really worked for me and really was significantly more effective than keeping my language spreads in my normal bullet journal. By having just language stuff in this, I'm really able to look back on my progress, especially in specific languages, and see where I can improve upon. It's definitely helped me a lot with goal setting, with knowing what languages I've been studying. I usually can't really keep up with trackers in here, especially if I have several different trackers, and having one specifically for language learning has meant that I'm able to really see what languages I'm putting work into and which ones I need to improve upon. I'm also really looking forward to being able to look back on this journal in 4 or 5 years and seeing how far my language learning has come, all of the languages I've learned, all of the progress I've made in those languages in those 4 or 5 years, whereas, as I said, going through all of my old bullet journals to see that really wouldn't give me that scale of being able to see how far I've come. So in 2019, I'm 100% sticking with 2 separate bullet journals. Starting in 2020, I'm planning to switch my bullet journal over to the calendar year as well. However, I feel like just having a separate bullet journal, as I said, really allows me to just look at my language learning and see where I'm going with that, especially since I study so many different languages. So this really just seems like the most effective and efficient system for me. I could see a lot of reasons why it wouldn't be effective and efficient for another person, but for me specifically, I think this is definitely going to be the route that I take probably forever. And if you've found that kind of your language spreads get lost in your normal bullet journal, or it involves too much flipping for you, etc., I'd highly suggest trying this method out. So this is a large soft cover moleskin. It's one of the gridded ones. I had originally bought this for my freshman year bullet journal, but I used it for 1 or 2 spreads and really found that I liked the other style of bullet journal that I previously used much better, which is this smaller hardcover version. I've also since then switched over to using the dotted moleskin for my normal planning, but I am totally still okay with using the gridded for my language learning. So without further ado, here is my 2018 flip through. I need to give some sort of nice spread in the beginning here that says just language bullet journal or something and probably gives the years that I used this between, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. Also, please ignore the giant scratch on my hand. My cat got spayed this week, and getting her into her crate was definitely a little bit of a struggle. So the first spread that I have in here is this at the start spread. Basically, this just shows where I felt like my language levels were at the beginning of 2018. I cannot take credit for this spread. This one was one that Lindy Boats did in her planning video from 2018 that I would highly recommend you go and check out, especially if you like this spread. I just thought that this would work so well for my bullet journal and would be a great way to look at my language learning at the end of the year, and it definitely was. I really am glad that I did this, and this is going to be something that I continue doing. It's so crazy looking at this spread. Like, I feel like I came into this year knowing nothing, basically, looking at this. But really what happened is I just learned so much over the course of this year and have come so far. I can say that a lot of these levels are so beyond where they are here, and it's so crazy to look at these and see that this was where I was just a year ago. So I'm definitely going to be doing an at the end version of this for 2018, where I'll put these levels, and then in a different color I'm going to put kind of where I'm at now. And I'm also going to be carrying this spread on to 2019. I want to do one of these each year because really I did this just to kind of see where I was at. But looking back at this now, it's so crazy to see where I was and where I am now. So this is definitely going to carry on to each year, so I can be wowed and amazed every single time. I also have my 2018 goals and resolutions next to it. If you want to hear more about how these goals and resolutions went, you should definitely check out our podcast for last week, where we basically wrapped up our resolutions from 2018 and reflected upon the year and then made new resolutions for 2019. Then we move into kind of specific months trackers. Coming into the year, I would do a 2-page spread for each month, as you can see. The one side was my tracker, that is something that I've carried over from my old bullet journal system and something that I've continued to do throughout this year and will continue to bring into all future years. Basically what I do is I have each day of the month, and each color here corresponds to a different language that I study, so this allows me to see what languages I studied on what day. My goal for 2018 was to study a language every day, and I actually did accomplish that. I'm super proud of it, super happy that that was something that happened. And having a spread like this not only made me make sure that I studied every single day, but also allowed me to see what languages weren't getting a lot of attention. For example, I only see green on the 18th here, which means I only studied Bulgarian once in January. So it's easy for me to look back at this and say, hey, I need to study a little bit more Bulgarian the next month. The other thing that I have in this 2-page spread is my ideal routine and my goals for the month. The ideal routine is something that I didn't do super great in January, and this didn't really continue on to future months. I ended up finding a way to have a language routine by the end of the year, but I didn't really come to the way that works for me until probably September or October of this year. I'm not sure why I didn't check off or cross off anything on this goals list, so I'm not totally sure what I accomplished in January. That's something that hopefully I figured out as this bullet journal went on. But I do think setting goals for each month is a good idea because it allows me to kind of break down those goals and resolutions from 2018 in general onto a smaller, more manageable scale. February looks much the same. I guess I did give another shot at the ideal routine, but again, didn't go super well. Here's March, and as you can see, I stopped doing the ideal routine, and I really just had too much space on these spreads. You'll see as we go on that I started to do just 1 page per month. Here we have a TBR. I knew that I wanted to read 3 German books, 3 French books, a Spanish book, an Italian book, and probably some kind of other books like a Bulgarian book and an Esperanto book this year. So I started trying to map those out, but that didn't really work out for me. I didn't actually end up finishing any of these books. I have made quite a bit of progress in a lot of the books that I'm reading in other languages, but I really did not put enough time towards reading in general this year. I had the goal of 50 books total this year and wanted 10 of them to be in foreign languages, but I think I only ended up reading like 20 books this year. So this didn't end up coming to fruition, both because I wasn't reading enough in foreign languages and just because I wasn't reading enough at all. So this is something that I do want to do again this next year. I'm really determined to finally read 50 books. It's been a goal that I've had, I think, for the past 3 or 4 years now. So it's something I definitely want to have happen. And I would really like for a fifth of those 10 books to be in the languages that I study. So that will be something that I carry over to 2019, and I'm going to plan it out a little bit better because this didn't even finish getting planned. Here we have a spread that I'm also going to be bringing into 2019. I decided to kind of plan out my language learning this year, but also in a very loose way. So what I did is I filled each of these in the month before, kind of picked what my focuses were going to be, and I took each of my languages and sort of ranked them almost for each month. So the ones with the square are things I'm actively studying. The things with the circle are things that I'm maintaining my level in, and then the triangle is improving. And as we got to the end, I added the squiggle, which is dabbling. So basically I would plan out the month before. If it's January, I'd say, okay, in February I want to actively study Italian and Spanish. I'd like to improve my German level, and I would like to maintain my French level. So I basically just ranked them like that, and I also put down some events that were happening that month, relevant things such as OPIC exams. So that was important because I knew that I needed to have my Italian and Spanish ready for those exams. And then also just things like I knew I was going to be on a film set for all of June, so that meant that I knew I was going to be a little bit busier. I knew I was going to be speaking French every day on that film set. But then I had to kind of think about my other languages. You'll see that there's nothing that I'm actively studying here because I didn't really have enough time to sit down with a textbook at all this month. Overall, it's really interesting for me to look back and see kind of what I was working on this year. I can see why I didn't really make a lot of progress in Bulgarian, and it's because I didn't start actively studying it until the last 2 months of the year. And really, it's not even in here as something to kind of improve or maintain throughout the year. So that's definitely something that led to that. So this is definitely something I want to keep up. Helps me pick my focus, helps me kind of think about what I should be doing in each language. So this will definitely be getting moved on to the next year. Here we have April, looks much the same as everything else. Here I started filling things in, and you can see that I accomplished none of these goals this month. Here we have May. Again, didn't accomplish any of these goals. I'm not sure what was happening in April and May, but it's good for me to look back and see that I really only studied one language a day, and I wasn't even really making progress on the specific things that I wanted to do. Then we hit summer, and as those of you who watch this channel know, I do set myself specific summer goals because that is obviously when I have the most time to put towards language learning. Typically, not necessarily this year. So I set myself some goals, some general goals, as well as for each of the languages, and I have those there to look at. And I also wanted to try to journal every single day over summer, so I made this spread that had each of the weeks and then each of the days so I could color in the bubble. However, this one I never updated, and you can see I left myself a little sticky note for now as I planned that said that this spread didn't work for me. So this is something that's not going to be carried on. I think one of the great things about bullet journals though is you have the opportunity to try things out like this. When you buy a set planner, you're given the spreads, and if things work or don't work even just a little bit, you can't really change it, whereas here I was able to try out the spread, know that this one does not work for me at all. Maybe I'll find a way to get something similar to this to work for me. You'll also see that even my monthly spreads start to get altered as the year goes on because I make them work for me at the time. Here's where I switched over to doing 1 page per month spreads, which I think was significantly better for me. Then, because I hadn't put goals on these, I went back to the 2-page spread, even though it really didn't work for me, and you'll see later on I figured out how to solve this problem, and I don't know why I hadn't thought of it here. But here's that. September, I figured out how to put the goals on the same thing. However, I think I'd already mapped out my language learning a little bit, so I had already made the October-November spread, and there just ended up being a blank page. But you can see here I figured out how to keep my spreads with their goals on the same page. You got your tracker, you got your goals, and overall this layout is the layout that I'm going to continue to use into the new year. And so then we reach the end. We've got my December tracker and goals, and now I'm going to begin my reflection. I left this page blank for 2018 reflection just to kind of write about how I felt like my goals went, things to consider in the new year, anything related to that, sort of like a little journal entry. I'm going to put my at the end spread here, and then I'm going to do some 2018 statistics, and then we're going to move into 2019. So what I'm doing is just adding a part to this that shows where my level is at now. I feel like my French is a little bit improved. I definitely greatly improved my confidence in my accent, but I do need to work on naturally using some more advanced grammar constructs. I can easily use them when I'm writing, but it's just a little bit more difficult for me when speaking, and I definitely improved that a lot this year, but not enough that I feel like I've confidently gotten to where I need to be. Esperanto actually went back a little bit. A lot of people know that I'm not really doing anything with my Esperanto at this point. It just really isn't a priority for me anymore. I have a lot of other languages that I'd rather be spending time with. I feel like Spanish and Italian are really where I made the most progress this year. I went from knowing literally just a few words. I had them at the level of like 0 and just here because I knew how to basically say like hello and goodbye, and I ended up getting them to an intermediate low level in Spanish and an intermediate mid level in Italian. This year one new thing I took on is Gaelic, so that one's going with kind of the same thing that Spanish and Italian were at the beginning of the year, where it's just a little bar, I just know a few words, but I did think it was worth putting in because that is something I started at the end of 2018. And then down at the bottom in their own category I've put Haitian Creole and Japanese because I didn't really end up studying these languages this year. I really did not get a lot of time to study this year. Even though I studied every single day, a lot of it was not serious sit-down textbook study time the way that I would like. This year I've set myself the goal of doing at least 10 to 15 minutes a day, because sometimes this past year it was maybe like 7 minutes of flashcards, which at least was something and it was the right step for me at the time. But I'd really love to get studying at least 10 to 15 minutes a day. My all-time goal would be 30 every single day, and that's what I'm hoping to be at the end of the year. And so just looking at this and seeing that even without a lot of study I got this far, I'm super excited to see where I'll be at the end of next year. So on this 2018 stats page, I'm just putting some relevant numbers, such as the number of days I spent studying, the languages I studied, the language challenges I participated in, how many live tutoring sessions I took, how many journal entries I wrote, just things that I might want to look back on in the future. I don't really love how this spread turned out. I think next year when I do this, I'm going to have it sorted out a little bit more. This one's a little bit random and it gets done what I need it to, but I don't think it looks very pretty, to be honest. So now it is time to start planning for 2019. My first 2 pages are just going to be these 2 pages that I did for 2018, my at the start and my goals and resolutions. So once again, I am just going through and putting my current levels in visually, and then I am going to write a little bit about how I feel like my level is in that language and sort of give myself a basis for where I need to be going this year. So as you can see, I have my languages from last year, including the addition of Gaelic, and then I have also put 2 new languages, Japanese, which I guess was technically on there last year, but I didn't study it at all, and also Ꭴḵ. Ꭴʰ is going to be a little bit like Haitian Creole, where if it works out where I'm not actually traveling the way that I think I currently am, I probably will put that on the back burner for a future year. But for now, I'm pretty solid that I'm going to Benin this year, so I would really like to learn a little bit of Ꭴʰ. And then Japanese is something that, again, I would really like to get into this year. I know I've mentioned it several times, but if you really want to hear about sort of how that's involved this year, I suggest you watch the podcast. We really do cover all of these much more than I want to cover it in this video. And then for the goals and resolutions side, I'm going to start out by putting just my resolutions for the year with a little star next to them. These are things that are kind of things that I want to remember overarching in all of my language learning. And then I'm just going to add in some goals for each of the languages I'm studying, much like my summer goals spread. So my goals range from everything from trying to get my Spanish, German, and Italian up to an upper intermediate advanced level, to getting my Bulgarian from almost nothing to a B1, which is like a lower intermediate level, to just smaller things. Like with Gaelic, I just want to know where I hope to go with it. I'm currently just dabbling with it, so I hope to have a little bit more fun with it, and then I would like to see if I hope to continue or if I'm just gonna kind of keep it as something I dabble in. And for Ꭴʰ, I just want to kind of prepare myself for my travel. So not everything is a crazy, big, huge language goal. I really know what I want to focus on this year, and that is Bulgarian, German, Spanish, and Italian, as well as working on using my French. And you will note that there's no Esperanto on here. I just really want to focus on my other languages at the moment, and I don't really mind if that one gets so rusty that I can't really use it, because I find that I don't really have things that I want to be doing with that language in my life so much other than polyglot conferences, and I honestly would rather be using the other languages that I know at the conferences and things like that at this point in my life. Next, I'm working on my year outline like the one I did last year. I'm basically just copying that spread exactly. I'm not going to really solidify these until the month comes, so I am solidifying January, but I will kind of work on the others as the month comes. And then for my TBR, I'm doing this cute book setup this year. Totally unnecessary to do something like this, but I just wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. For some of these, I know exactly the books I want to read, so I'm putting the title in, and I'm going to color each of these in as I finish them. I also gave it this plant, which originally started out kind of looking like an aloe plant and then kind of fell apart, but it's okay. And now I'm gonna end this here, but I'm just going to go and make spreads like this one for January and February, and then probably leave the rest blank just so that way if I decide I want to alter it, I'll be able to in the coming months. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end of this video. If you're new here and managed to watch this video all the way through and would like to see more videos on language learning, definitely subscribe down below. We'll be posting every Saturday, so there will be an awful lot of videos of us speaking languages, talking about language learning, and giving advice. Other than that, I will see you on Saturday, and remember, practice makes progress. Bye guys!